Hello, everybody. Good evening, good day to all of you. Welcome to the latest episode of the Ask Abhijit show. I hope you're all doing great. And let's see who all we have with us. And yes, like yesterday, today's video is sponsored by the like button. Go hit it and help our sponsors. So we have with us Krishna, Harsh, Raghav, Bihari Gal, Alok, Divesh, a Korean name, Adonis, Nitesh, Harsh Zaveri, Harsh Patel, Akshay, Rahul, MMD, Akshit, Mohit, Nirmit, Samarth, Technical Mobile Ideas, Aman, Shivraj, Vinay, Nevaguna, Give You Up, Radha Krishna, Lakshya, Dungar Singh Chauhan, Sena, Colvin, DJ, Destruction, Sakit, Aman, Anvay, Tukesh, Animish, Kuldeep, Mohit, Anup, Akshit, Informative Mania, Umbrella Corporation, Divesh, Satinder, Mohit, Om, Kuldeep, and lots of other people. Good evening, good day to all of you. Great to see you here. Rajat, Pranav, Aman, Amar, Pranjal, Swapnil, and everybody else. So today we're going to talk about geopolitics and history mostly, and current affairs. Uh, so let us begin with the questions, and I think we should begin with the question that everybody has asked the most. The question du jour, which is of course this one. Lots of people have asked me about this, so I've taken one which represents all the people who asked this question. I got dozens of various versions of this question. So the question is very simple: what is the agnipath scheme? It is by Rajat. Is it a good or a bad initiative by the government? Why are so many people protesting? Yes, good question. It's become a big well, yeah, controversy for whatever reason. So let me share the screen and see and kind of show what's going on. So people are saying it's a bad scheme. Various retired personnel, etc., army generals, and so on. So let me give you just one example of that. Uh, so this is one example. There are lots of retired army personnel who are saying similar things. So this is by Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia retired. And this gentleman says, death knell for the armed forces. TOD, not tour of duty, not tested. No pilot project, straight implementation. Will also lead to the militarization of society. Nearly 75% youth year on year back rejected and dejected without a job. Semi-trained in arms, especially example agniveers. Not a good idea. Nobody gains. No one gains. So there is one example, and there are lots of other examples. Lots of media people, lots of retired army people, and so on are criticizing this. So I read an article said that this is like a kindergarten scheme for the army. It's going to ruin the army. Blah 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 blah, and on and on. So the impression that they are trying to create is that this is terrible for the armed forces. It's going to be the death knell for the armed forces. This is the end, destroyed. The army is going to be destroyed, and so on. How much of this is true? They were saying similar things about the farm laws, and I supported the farm laws, and I got hundreds of comments saying that Abhijit, you're wrong. Abhijit, you're mistaken. You're stupid. Blah blah blah. Fine, okay. You disagree, and it's fine. It's fine with me. I don't take it personally. Now, so what are the characteristics of the tour of duty, the Agnipath scheme? It is between the ages of 17 and half, I think, and 22 or 23 or something. This year, it's going to be extended up to a couple of years of age, maybe up to 24 or something like that, whatever it is. So this year is an exceptional year. They're going to extend it by 2 years, the age, the upper age. But going forward is going to be between 17 and a half years and 22. So if you are within that age range, you are eligible for this. Now it's a 4-year tour of duty. So you're not getting a permanent job. You're getting a 4-year commission. In those 4 years, you will become a proper soldier. You'll be trained. The training is about 6 months. Then you go on a tour of duty. You serve in the armed forces. You get a salary of, I don't know, 30,000-40,000 a month, something like that. Yeah. And then after the end of 4 years, one fourth of the people who came into your batch will be retained. The rest will be released back into the civilian population. What you will get if you're released is you will get about 12 lakh rupees. That's what the government will give you, a lump sum kind of thing, right? It's a 12 lakh rupee corpus, 11 point something, nearly 12 lakh rupees. And since you have served in the armed forces for 4 years, and since there's almost no expenditure, the salary that you acquired will also be saved. So that's roughly, give or take, 10 lakh rupees. So once you're out, Let's say you went in at the age of at the age of 18, and you're out at the age of 22. At the age of 22, you will get a lump sum 22 lakh rupee corpus of money. 22 lakh rupees at the age of 22. You have 22 lakh rupees in your bank account. How many 22-year-olds know what 22 lakh rupees looks like? I didn't know what 22 lakh rupees looked like at the age of 22. I didn't know what 10 lakh rupees looked like at the age of 22. So you are getting a start in life with 22 lakh rupees. Can you imagine that? Is that a bad thing? And see, it's like this: not everybody is cut out for the armed forces. So one fourth will be retained, those who have performed really well and those who have shown the inclination to stay in for the long game. The others, they will get all the skills, all the training, the leadership training, the fitness training, various other mechanical and technological training that you need in the armed forces to be effective. And then you're out into the job market at the age of 22, when everybody else graduates and so on. You already got some training which will add to the credit, which will be like half a graduation. So whatever training you got in these 4 years will, those that will add, that will be recognized as credits towards a degree. So it will be like half your degree is done right there in case you want to go for a degree. But most people, I would say, would take those 22 lakh rupees and start a business or start something. Or so, some people would want to go into the CRPF or whatever it is, right? Something like that. So there are so many options open at the age of 22 once you're out of it. Now, and one of the objections that people are raising is that in 6 months you cannot train a soldier. In 4 years you will not be trained sufficiently. It is going to reduce the army to a kindergarten. 4 years, eh? That's what they're saying. I think everybody on this channel and most people in India have the highest regard for the IDF, Israeli Defense Force. Yes. Do you know that in Israel there is compulsory conscription? It's a 3-year tour of duty. In 3 years they train their personnel, their soldiers fully. After this 3-year term, they're back into the civilian population. You think the Israeli armed forces are not sufficiently well trained? Is that the impression that you get? No, they are one of the best and most professional armed forces in the world. And their training period, their entire tour period is 3 years. We are doing it for 4 years. You think we can't achieve the same level or better level of proficiency and competence and professionalism in a 4-year term tour of duty? What nonsense is this sort of argument? Stupid argument. In Israel you have 3 years. Similar cases are there in the US, in South Korea. They also have similar things. Also Russia, Germany, Taiwan, the UK, all of these countries have similar schemes. They all have extremely well trained armed forces. So this argument falls flat on its face, and these people who are making the arguments that this is not tested, this is a death knell for armed forces, they seem to have some ulterior motives. All right, I'm not pointing fingers at any specific individual. I'm not even pointing fingers at the person whose tweet I showed. I'm just saying in general, there seems to be something going on. They are trying to misrepresent what is happening right now. The average age of the average Indian armed forces soldier or officer or whatever, the average age of any random person is about 32 to 33 years. It's rather old. So by implementing the scheme, we're going to have a younger, fitter, and more modern and more dynamic corpus of soldiers, right? In the armed forces. It's good. We need fresh intake. We need young blood in the armed forces, younger people, stronger and fitter people, right? And a more modern outlook that comes in from the young people. Teenagers and youngsters are very future oriented. They are very modern. Their orientation and attitude is very modern, much more than people who are older. So it's a good thing. And not everybody wants a job for life. Today the teenagers, the youngsters, they want to explore different things, but they also want to contribute something to their country and to the defense of their country. This is a scheme that is perfect for that, you know. And some people say that it's going to destroy the culture of the armed forces. What stupid claim is that? The culture and the traditions of the armed forces are passed on via the officers. And this Agnipath scheme is not for the intake of officers. It is for the intake of personnel who come below the officer level. So it's not going to change anything about the culture of the armed forces. If the officers can do their job, then the culture is there. So please understand, I am not in any way criticizing the way the armed forces are, but they need reforms. India has one of the best and most professional armies and militaries in the world. We are proud of everything they have achieved. We are proud of everything they're still doing today. They are putting their lives on the line every single day and night while we are sitting comfortably wherever we are. So we are proud of the armed forces, but it does need reforms. The Indian army, the Indian military is still run the way it was run in the 1960s and 50s, 1940s. Many of these traditions and all that, the culture, it comes back from the British Raj days. That needs to slowly go. We need professionalism. We need what's called lateral intake. We need people who can come and go for a certain duration and then go back. I mean, look at countries where you have such schemes. The uh, the people who have come out of the armed forces have contributed so much to society. Many US presidents were they served in the Marines or the Air Force or Navy or whatever, right? John F. Kennedy is an example. George Bush's father, the first Bush, George Bush Jr. Senior, he served in Second World War. He was shot down by the Japanese. You know, and some people say it's going to lead to the militarization of society. I think India's society needs a little bit of militarization and that military attitude. I think that would really help Indian society, because right now Indian society, it's kind of undisciplined, indisciplined. It needs some of that. And the Indian government has said very clearly that we are not going to take back this scheme. Good job, don't take it back. And once this scheme is implemented, yes, some things will need to be changed, some tweaks will have to be made. That's what happens with any scheme anywhere in the world. So after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they're going to refine the scheme, make some changes, and it's going to become even better. And in about a decade's time, what's going to happen is that we will have more than 1 million trained reserves who have been released back into the civilian population. And these trained reserves are very well, they can come in very handy in times of need. If there is a war, well, we you know what kind of neighborhood we are sitting in India. We have a bad neighborhood, we have very bad neighbors. In case there is a war and we need to pull up some reserves, you will have a ready made population of well trained reserves who can come back, and they know how to handle weapons, they know how the army works, they know how these things work, and they'll be able to fit back on demand into the armed forces. Well trained, motivated, patriotic people who have gone through 4 years of training and service. I mean, it is an excellent thing. Now, some people will not agree with it. It's fine. Today, what is the date today? Today is the 19th of June 2022. Take out your diaries, write it down that Abhijit Chavda said this on 19th of June 2022, that this is an excellent scheme. Then come back in 10 years' time, open the diary, and then ask yourselves, was I right or was I wrong? I was right about the farm laws. The government had to take it back. Fine. This scheme is even better. This is an excellent scheme for the military, for the nation. People will create the sort of narrative that it's a bad thing. Come back in 10 years' time and then see. Do a little bit of growing up. Right now, you may be doubtful because your favorite influencer, or news reader, or YouTuber or whatever must have told you that this is a bad scheme. Come back in 10 years after you do a bit of growing up, and then and then see. Then ask yourself, was this a good scheme or a bad scheme? Was I right or wrong? I guarantee you, likh ke rakh lo, I am right. It's an excellent scheme for India. So that is what I have to say about this. And I know lots of people on both sides. These days there are two wings in India, left wing and right wing. And left wing is totally against the scheme, we know that. But plenty of various influential people on the so-called right wing are also disparaging this plan, this scheme. I'm not naming anybody, but we know that some people are doing that. Many people are doing that. Well, they're all wrong. And I wonder why they're doing this. Some people are very much anti anything that this government does. And I find it very strange and perplexing. And I wonder what the motivation is. So I am very clear about this. This is an excellent scheme, the Agnipath scheme, and we should all support it. It's going to be very beneficial for the country, for the military in the long run. The game is always in the long run, not the short term. All right. So I support it 100%, and so should you. Prem Sudha Singh says, when did our millennium of humiliation end? And if it is still continuing, when will it end? Hmm. The millennium of humiliation has never ended. It is still in force. Why is it still in force? Because India is still colonized. All that happened in the last 1000 years, the two waves of colonization. The first was the Turkic wave of colonization, and the second was the European wave of colonization. All the effects, all the harm they did to India as a civilization, as a culture, as a society, and as a modern nation state, that harm still endures. The effects of the colonization are still visible, they are still being lived by us. Look at the language that we are speaking in all over our media. Look at what the language I'm speaking in. I am just as mentally colonized as anybody else. I am more comfortable speaking English than various other Indian languages. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way we have been raised, brought up, and so on. We are still colonized. As long as we are colonized, the millennium of humiliation has not ended. And the other thing I would like to say is that as long as India is there is external interference within India, as long as India does not have a fully independent foreign policy and internal policy, the millennium of humiliation has not ended yet. And India right now does not have. A, we have a very good government, we have a very strong government, but there are forces external to India that are still way too powerful for us to resist. So they succeed in messing up our internal affairs and pressurizing us on the foreign policy front. We are now pushing back, but there is still a long way to go. Let me give you an example. We were speaking about the agnipath scheme. Let me share something to give you an example of what I mean by this. So this is a tweet by Mr. Vikram Sood. The frequency and ease with which riots, arson, and violence for totally unrelated and trivial issues have been occurring means that there is a nationwide, well oiled internal ecosystem aided by an external facility that enables this to happen countrywide. Furthermore, Mr. Sood says, and let's wait for it to load. Hello, gonna load? Yes. So this is a continuation of the previous tweet. This is not democracy at work, but a result of a sinister campaign designed to create anarchy and weaken the country politically, economically, militarily. This campaign is likely to continue until the next elections. Implications not only for the government but also for the country. Mr. Vikram Sood, in case you don't know, is head the former head of the Research and Intelligence Wing, RAW, India's external intelligence agency. Mr. Vikram Sood is a former head of the RAW. So he knows what he is saying. He knows what's going on. So when he says this, we've got to take it very seriously. What he is implying is that there is an internal system within India that works against the Indian national interest, and this is all supported by an external forces and external powers. That's what he is saying. That's precisely what I mean. So we are still being coerced and bullied and pushed around, and our internal affairs are being there is interference internally by foreign powers, and there is pressure on us vis-a-vis the foreign policy also by certain foreign powers. We know who they are. So it's still going on. So the humiliation, or the millennium of humiliation, has not ended. We are still living through it. It will end when India regains its historical position economically, military, and civilizationally. That's when the millennium of humiliation will officially end. We are far from that yet. It may still be another 50 or 100 years, depending on what we do today as a people, as a country, as a civilization, and what each of us individually does for the country. So it all rests in the hands of individuals and the government. So it's not ended yet. Okay, Domur Akil says, I am from Mauritius. Last year, the International Court of Justice gave Mauritius the sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago. But the American army is not leaving Diego Garcia, and recently the Mauritian flag was taken down on the island of Peros Banos. Could you give an explanation of what's happening there? What is the geographical importance? Why are no countries debating this? Good question. Whenever we talk about these issues, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up the map. Where's the map? Where's the map? Let me find the map. Where is the map? The map. Here's the map. Come on, map. Here we are. All right. So Akil is talking about the Chagos archipelago vis-a-vis Mauritius. So where is Mauritius? Once again, So we know where India is. This here is India, the Indian subcontinent. This is the Indian Ocean region, which, well, essentially should be our backyard. And if you go south, we have the two islands of Mauritius and Réunion. And if we go further north towards the Seychelles, you will find further north from Seychelles, south of the Maldives. Okay, here, not north from the Seychelles, east from Seychelles. Okay, here we are. This is the Chagos archipelago. This entire thing. It's a bunch of islands. It's an archipelago, and the largest uh, island is this one here, Diego Garcia. It's called the British Indian Ocean Territory. So, what is the story here, right? So, Mauritius claims that this belongs to them. That the this region, the Chagos archipelago, is under Mauritian sovereignty. Mauritius should have the sovereignty over this region. So, what is the dispute? What is the history, right? Let me close this for a while so that you understand what's happening. Okay, so that's a question once again. So what is the dispute all about? Let's look back at the history of the place, right? So it all begins in the 19th century. I think in the early 19th century, around 1815, 1814, the British took over possession of the Chagos archipelago, this bunch of islands. Now, this was not some uninhabited bunch of islands. There were people living there, the Chagosian people. So these people, their ancestry is mostly African, Madagascar, Mozambique, other Eastern African nations. And there is eventually, later on, there came to be a significant amount of Indian and Malay ancestry, including many people from Mauritius who were brought there and made to settle down there. So the British in the 19th century took over Seychelles and the Mauritius as well, which I just showed you on the map, right? So how did Indians end up there? So that is something I need to explain to you as well. So let me share my screen once again. So in the 19th century, the British, they sent a bunch of Indian indentured workers uh, into to various places, various parts of the world. 500,000 were transported to Mauritius. When you say indentured workers, it's a nice word for slaves. The British took Indians as essentially as slaves. They would pay them a little amount of money. So technically, it's not slavery, but it's nothing but slavery. So these people were taken against their wishes and they were transported to these far off places in the world, and they were moved there forever. They had no way of coming back to India ever, and their descendants still live there. So 500,000 almost to Mauritius, another 150,000, 1.5 lakhs to Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, South Africa, and Tanzania, etc., Kenya, that region, East Africa, and another 500,000 to the West Indies, to places like Guyana, Trinidad, and so on, right? So the West Indies, East Africa, and Mauritius, Ile Maurice. So that's where Indians were transported from Mauritius. Some of them were transported to Chagos. So the Chagosian people, their ancestry is African and some Indian and some Malay ancestry. So that is what this ethnic group is like. Now, so this was the 19th century. That's what happened. In the early 20th century, around 1903 or so, Seychelles was separated from this from the British possessions. It became a separate. It was administered separately, right? Now, the reason why the British took over all these islands in the Indian Ocean region was to consolidate their hold over this vital piece of maritime real estate. They wanted to control all the the exit points, all the sea routes and all that. And what better way to do it than to control various territories and various islands and various archipelagos in this region, strategic locations from which you can in which you can place your navy and control the entire region, right? So that's why they did that. And of course, the more territory you acquire and administer, the more power you have over the whole world. So in 1902, 1903, Seychelles was separated, and they kept on administering Mauritius and Chagos. Now, in 1956, the British were already weakened by the disaster in the Second World War. The US was the dominant power. Then there was this Suez crisis in 1956. That's a whole different story. Very interesting and very, it's kind of forgotten today what happened in Suez. but it kind of changed world history. So 1956 was the crisis. It was all about control of the Suez Canal, Port Said, and that region. Uh, and the British wanted to control it. The Egyptians wanted to nationalize it. There was a war there, and the Americans eventually arm twisted the British and the French into getting out of there. And from that day onwards, the British were essentially vassals of the Americans. So after 1956, after the disaster in the Suez crisis, the British decided to withdraw east of Suez. Yeah. So they decided to withdraw from their territorial possessions east of Suez. In 1965, the British, what they did was they separated the Chagos archipelago from Mauritius. Yeah, separate administrative division. In 1965 itself, there was a US UK agreement which gave the Americans kind of possession of the Chagos archipelago, especially the Diego Garcia island, right? And they would use it for military purposes. In 1968, Mauritius was given independence, but Chagos archipelago was not made part of that, right? And the Mauritius government has always claimed that as part of their territory because it was. I mean, technically, for the longest time, it was part. It was administered from Mauritius, and the people also have links to Mauritius. But the British said refused to do that, and they gave it to the US. In 2016, the lease of the US was extended by another 20 years. So let's take a look at Diego Garcia. What does this place look like? Diego Garcia. So the Chagos archipelago actually is an extension of the Lakshadweep and Maldives system. Okay, Maldives historically, culturally, is part of the Indian civilization, Indian subcontinent. The people of Maldives are of Indian origin. They're the same ethnicity as people in southern India, and they have in Maldivian history, they have always known about the Chagos archipelago. It was quite a way south from the Maldives, but Maldivians would go there from time to time. Sometimes during storms, they would get shipwrecked there and they would have to be rescued and so on. So historically, before the European intrusion into this region, it was, you could say, part of the greater Indian territory, Chagos archipelago. Now, the British Indian territory, Diego Garcia, this is what it looks like. Okay, it's a wonderfully constructed island. This is entirely more or less run by the US. This is the Diego Garcia Airport, a very important strategic location for the US, from which they can essentially watch over everything that's happening in the Indian Ocean region. They can keep an eye on what India is doing. They can keep an eye on India's activities, naval activities, military activities, other activities. They can keep an eye on the Chinese, what the Chinese are doing, and what's happening in Sri Lanka. It's a prime, centrally located location. So that's why the US wants this, and they want to hang on to it, right? So, and in 2016, they got another extension of 20 years. About 3 to 5,000 American military personnel are typically stationed at Diego Garcia at any given point of time. In 2017, the International Court of Justice said that they should go back to Mauritius. It belongs to Mauritius. And then later on, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea also said that this should go to Mauritius. It belongs to Mauritius, and it is administered illegally by the UK and by extension by the US. So, so the so it's very clear what the UN, what the International Court of Justice, what the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, they are all in agreement that this should belong to Mauritius, and they have ordered the UK to give it back to Mauritius. It's not happened. They have taken no action on this. The Americans are also supporting the UK, which is very strange because they talk about a rules-based international order. What happened to their precious rules-based international order? When it came to a dispute between the Philippines and the Chinese, when the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea ruled in favor of the Philippines, the Americans supported that. Yeah, the Americans supported the ruling when it was in favor of the Philippines, but now when it's in favor of the Mauritians and the Chagosians, the Americans don't want it, are refusing to agree to it. So what happened to the rules-based international order? They will support it when it is in favor of when it's in their favor, and they will refuse to agree to it when it's not in their favor. This makes the US look very bad. And they're not going to give it up. They want to hang on to Diego Garcia. It's very important for them. But then they should stop the hypocrisy about this rules based international order and all that. So that is what's happening. That's why it's geographically important. That's why it's geopolitically important. And why is nobody debating about this? Because the Americans are all powerful. You don't want to offend them. That's what it is. The UK doesn't matter. The UK is a pushover. The UK is, well, a vassal state of the US. The Chinese would say on their Global Times Twitter account that the UK are lapdogs of the US. I don't say that. The Chinese say that. Okay, so that's how it is. So the UK doesn't matter. It's the US that's holding on to this territory, and that it's important because it's a very well geographically located place, centrally located, and it's a very good. The island, its geography is very good for having a large naval and air force base there, and that's why they want to hold on to it, and they don't really care about rules and laws or anything. It's all about holding on to everything they have. So that's what it is. So that's what's happening. I don't see anything going in favor of the people of Chago. The Mauritians recently landed there and did something, but obviously not at Diego Garcia, I'm sure, somewhere else, like you said, on the island of Peros Banos and so on. So the Americans will. I mean, the Mauritians are just a small little country. They are, well, just an island nation, right? And in geopolitics, might is right. It's the law of the jungle, and that's just how it works. So that's what's happening, and nobody wants to offend the Americans, so no one's talking about it. Human rights and justice and fairness and equality and rules based order. These are nice words to use when it suits you, but it actually has no real meaning. So unfortunately, that's where we are. Okay, this is by Darshan asking this for the 482nd time. Why do some castes like Brahmins and JATS have more steppe and Eastern European ancestry than the other castes in the Indian subcontinent? Is it due to the Aryan imagination theory or something else? Reply, please, and so on. Yeah. Okay. Darshan. So there is no such thing as a caste. All right. There are jatis and varnas and all that. The caste term is a colonial imposition upon us and so on. But let's not go there. Let's talk about the so-called steppe ancestry and all that. So what is this wonderful steppe ancestry? Let's go back to the map. Where's the map? Here's the map. So what is the steppe? The steppe is the a certain region across Eurasia, all the way from Manchuria in the east. You know, this here, if you can see my mouse pointer, this region is Manchuria. All the way from here across Mongolia, if you can see where Mongolia is. Yeah, this is Mongolia. From Kazakhstan all the way to Ukraine, Belarus, Eastern Asia, Eastern Europe, and southern parts of Russia, continental Eurasian Russia. All of that is the Eurasian steppe or steppe or whatever you want to call it. That is the steppe. Now, in the Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic, etc. theory, apparently for the longest time, the researchers used to say that there was an Aryan invasion, then it was a migration and so on, and it came from the steppe, from the Eurasian steppe. That's what they claimed. And there is clear affinity between Indian populations and populations of Europe. We know that. We all know that. And some components, some genetic components are higher in some parts of India, and there is more similarity between some parts of India and some parts of Europe, and so on and so forth, which is obviously bound to happen because there is common genetic origin. We all know that. The only question is where did it originate? We all know that 70, 80,000 years ago, our ancestors were in Africa. So from Africa, they moved into Eurasia. They wandered around. Eventually, they settled down in India. India was the original founder zone of the out of Africa migration. From India, there were migrations to all parts of Eurasia. We met the Neanderthals. We interbred with them. So most non-African humans have some Neanderthal ancestry. Indians mostly don't have it for some reason, and so on. Long story. Now, the real question is the Aryan invasion thing, migration thing. The real question, central question, is what is the origin of Sanskrit and Hinduism? It's not a genetic question at all. It's about what is the origin of Sanskrit, the Indo-European languages, and the ancient Indo-European culture, which is Hinduism. That is the real question. And everyone, that is the question they are trying to they're trying to say it came from out of India. So they want to portray Indian culture as being a predatory, invasive culture, and Sanskrit as well. That is the whole crux of the story, and they wrap it inside these genetic stories and all that. There is no link, actual link between genetics and languages, genetics and culture. That's a different story. The question is about the JATS and the Brahmins and so on. Why do they have more steppe ancestry? So this term steppe ancestry, it's a nice tag that they have constructed. And when you use this tag, yesterday there was a question that I got, that can a person with no scientific training tell whether a certain piece of research is authentic or not? And there is no way a person without scientific training can tell whether research is authentic or not. So it's very easy to mislead people by somebody posing as an expert and saying, "Yeah, this is what has happened." There are certain business journalists who have written books nowadays. Tony Joseph, who's written a book about the what, early Indians or some such thing. Terrible book. I have reviewed it. Terrible book. All lies, all distortions, and all that. So, what is this step ancestry? It is a term. It is a term they've created. It is a tag they have attached to a certain group of genes. Step ancestry. Hmm? And it's supposed to be the overall um, source of the Indo-European so-called Aryan ethnicity and languages and culture. So they say that this so-called step ancestry, this certain genetic component, is the entire origin of all Indo-European languages and culture. And they have given it the title of step ancestry. They could have given it a different title, Martian ancestry. Then we would all imagine that our people came from Mars, right? Now the question is, what is the origin of this so-called step ancestry? They say that there was a group of people in the Eurasian steppe who then came to India, to Iran, and they went westwards, and they are the originators, the progenitors of the Indo-European peoples and languages and culture. This, they say, happened about 5 or 6 thousand years before today. My question is very simple: where did those people come from? The people who gave rise to the so-called step ancestry, where did their ancestors come from? Answer that question. Can they answer it? Apparently nowadays we can. So let's find out what that is. One second. So there are a number of famous geneticists in the world. We have our own geneticist, famous geneticist. His name is Dr. Neeraj Rai. But when I talk about Dr. Neeraj Rai, people will say, "Oh, he's Indian. Indians don't know anything. Give us a different source, a Western source." You know, Gar ki murgi dal barabar. Dr. Neeraj Rai is one of the best geneticists in the world, but people don't want to talk about him. So, okay, let's talk about somebody else. I have a whole conversation with Dr. Neeraj Rai about about the same topic, but let me talk about somebody else. So, let us talk about the great, renowned Dr. David Reich. Reich. So, this is a lecture that Dr. Reich gave on the 12th of July 2022, a week before today. A week before today. Last Sunday, he gave this lecture. Okay. The title of the lecture is The Genetic History of the Southern Arc, a bridge between West Asia and Europe. Okay. So, what is this Southern Arc? The Southern Arc is an area divided geographically between West Asia and Europe, which we define as spanning the culturally entangled regions of Anatolia and its neighbors, in both Europe, Asia and the Balkans, and in West Asia, Cyprus, Armenia, the Levant, Iraq, and Iran. So that is what he defines as the Southern Arc. The eastern region of the Southern Arc is Iraq and Iran. Now, what is this lecture all about, and what does it say? Let's look at the the last paragraph. A striking signal of steppe migration into the southern arc is evident in Armenia and northwest Iran, where admixture with the Yamnaya patrilineal descendants occurred, coinciding with the third millennium BCE displacement from the steppe itself. This ancestry, pervasive across numerous sites of Armenia from 2000 to 600 BC, was diluted, blah, 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 blah. The impermeability of Anatolia to exogenous migration contrasts with our finding that the Yamnaya had two distinct gene flows, both from West Asia, suggesting that the Indo-Anatolian language family originated in the eastern wing of the southern arc, and that the steppe served only as a secondary staging area of the Indo-European language dispersal. Can you see what this great famous gentleman is saying here? The steppe served as a secondary staging area of Indo European language dispersal. Yeah. And the Yamnaya had two distinct gene flows, both from West Asia, right? And what was the thing about Eastern? Where is it? Eastern. One second, let me search for it. Yeah, the Indo-Anatolian language family originated in the eastern wing of the southern arc. What is the eastern wing of the southern arc that he spoke about? Let me just quickly show you on the map what this eastern wing he's talking about. One second. Let me go on the map and show you the eastern wing. Where is the map? Here's the map. Where's the map? Come on, map. The eastern wing that he speaks about is Iran. All right. So until now, they were saying that this so-called steppe ancestry originated in Central Asia, in the Central Asian steppe, Eurasian steppe. Now, in a roundabout, complicated way, Dr. Reich is saying that the steppe itself was a secondary point of dispersal. What was he saying? Uh, the steppe served as a secondary staging area of the Indo-European dispersal, language dispersal, and genetic dispersal. And the actual staging, the actual origin seems to be in the eastern wing of the southern arc, which is now Iran. So slowly, 10 years ago, they were saying it is the Central Asian steppe. Now they are saying it is the eastern wing of the southern arc, which is Iran. And if you watch my conversation with Dr. Neeraj Rai, he is very clear that geographically Iran is part of the Indian subcontinent. Because why do I say this? Why does he say this? Because if you want to go from Central Asia into India, it is extraordinarily difficult. There are so many mountain ranges to cross. It's very cold. You will die. You will most likely die. But if you want to cross from India into Iran, you just have to carry some water and maybe a donkey or a camel and some food, and you just have to walk west, and you will easily reach Iran. There's nothing in the way. So India and Iran, it is part of the extended geographical region of the Indian subcontinent. So what Dr. Reich is saying, that the so-called steppe ancestry actually originates in the southern wing of the in the eastern wing of the southern arc. It originates in Iraq. 2-3 years down the line, he will quietly make a more complicated statement saying it originates further east in he will now say Pakistan and Afghanistan. And in 10 years' time, they will say India. Let us be very clear about this. Let us be very clear about this. When they say steppe ancestry, we have to ask them where is the origin of the steppe ancestry itself. And this link that I just showed you, this lecture that Dr. Reich gave last week, in that he is saying that this steppe ancestry doesn't originate in the steppe. It originates in Iran, he is saying. Now, after some more genetic data is going to come up, this year there's going to be an R1A paper that will be published from India. Once that paper is published, Dr. Reich will say that the steppe ancestry originates essentially from the Indus Valley region. It's going to happen. So all of these complicated discussion, all of these complicated topics, actually, you have to ask a very simple question: what is the origin of it all? The so-called steppe ancestry, where did that come from? Were they born in the steppe with those human beings? That they originated from the ground, or did they migrate from somewhere else? Of course, they migrated from somewhere else. That is the question. And at the end of the day, when all the data is out, when sufficient data is revealed, it is going to be very clear it all came from the Indian subcontinent. Whether it is Iran or further east from Iran, most likely it's further east from Iran, because we know very well the Iranians are descendants of ancient Indians. It's very clear. So that is the crux of the matter. Wait for some time. Patience. I advocate patience. In the next 5 years, all of these people, they're gonna sing the same story, and the steppe ancestry will originate from India. It's gonna happen. Right. Gagan Chengappa says, as per TV serials, the great man Ashok got betrayals. One of that was that his mother was killed from the childhood itself. So he took revenge by killing his brothers. Okay. Tell me something. Let's say I am a kid. Let's say I'm 15 years old. I want to be a great scientist. I want to be a scientist. How should I study science? Should I watch science fiction movies and serials to learn science? Or should I spend hundreds of hours studying science from actual proper textbooks and solving thousands of problems? and investing the time and the effort and the hard work into actually reading and studying. Can you become a great scientist, very proficient in science, quantum mechanics, relativity, whatever, by watching TV serials about science? No, you can't. Similarly, if you want to understand history, please stop watching TV serials. It's entertainment, it's fiction. If you want to learn actual history, please stop relying on TV serials. Read. There is no substitute for reading. There is no substitute for hard work. I understand that this is the, maybe you don't have access to books. So please, dear friend Gagan, please, if you are really interested in history, invest in at least one or two good history books about, let's say, the Mauryan era or whatever, whichever phase of Indian history you're interested in. Invest in a couple of books, read those books, and that will give you a better perspective than TV serials. TV serials is all about viewership. It's all about creating interest, and the best way to create interest is by distorting history and saying, "Oh my God, everything you've been taught is wrong." Right? So please, that's not the way to study history. Okay? Thank you. Bakhanani says, if you compare the achievements and personality of Chandragupta Maurya and his grandson Ashok, who comes out as more successful? Who is truly worthy of the title the Great? So Chandragupta Maurya and his descendant Ashok, grandson Ashok, who was greater? Who is more successful? So let's see where the two came from. Let's begin with Ashok. Ashok was the son of a great Mauryan emperor, right? Bindusar. Was it Bindusar? Most likely Bindusar. Uh, so his father was already the emperor of all of India, and all he did was he took over the reins of the kingdom, the crown, from his father in whatever way was best. He killed off his siblings, his half siblings, and he put down various rebellions and so on because he was killing people and so on. And he waged a few wars. He committed this atrocity in Kalinga, and then he said, "Okay, now I'm done. I'm now peace." And then he uplifted this obscure sect, philosophical sect called the Bauddha sect, and he turned it into a global force. That's what Ashok did. So what great struggle did he undergo? He killed off all his siblings and step siblings, and he waged a few wars, and he crushed a few rebellions. That's what he did. What did Chandragupta Maurya do? What did Chandragupta Maurya do? He was born in obscurity. He was not royalty. He had no royal lineage. He was most likely an orphan. We don't even know who his parents were, right? So he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth like Ashok. He was not born as a prince. He was born in obscurity, maybe in poverty. We don't know what he was born as. We don't know who his parents were. He was an orphan. And he obviously exhibited certain traits that the great Vishnugupta Chanakya noticed, and he recognized that there is some potential in this boy. And what Vishnugupta Chanakya did was he trained this boy in statecraft and various other matters, like maybe military arts and strategy and tactics and all that. And with the help of the great Vishnugupta Chanakya, under his mentorship, this unknown boy of obscure origins went on to become, in a span of about 20 years, the emperor of all of India. He conquered the whole of India. The story of how he did that is not even well known. So if you compare Chandragupta Maurya with Ashok, there is no question about who was greater, who was more successful. Chandragupta Maurya was the most successful of all of the Mauryan emperors, the greatest of them all. He created an empire from nowhere. I speak about Napoleon. I have a video on this channel about Napoleon, in which I speak about, in brief, about his history, that he went from obscurity to emperor in about 19 years. Chandragupta did something way greater than that, way greater than what Napoleon achieved. There was an existing empire, the Nanda Empire, which was most likely in power when the alleged invasion by Alexander happened. Most likely it was the Nandas who were in power. And within 20 years, the entirety of the Indian subcontinent was ruled by Chandragupta. So that is an incredible, spectacular achievement. There is no question about who was greater. It was Chandragupta Maurya who was greater. Samhita says, why does the English language have so many different accents all over the world? What is the main history behind these accents? Which one is the oldest? I know it's very funny, but it randomly strikes my mind. Okay. See, in every part of the world, there are different languages. Within India, which is a vast subcontinent, we have different languages. Some languages sound very different. So people who grow up in these regions speaking a certain mother tongue, they will acquire certain phonetic traits, certain ways of pronouncing certain sounds, right? So when you speak a foreign language, some of your native accents and pronunciations will come into it. So that's why when Indians speak English, they speak it in a certain way with certain accents. When the Japanese speak English, they speak it in a different way. They don't say sorry, they say solly. They don't say English, they say English, and so on. The Chinese speak English in a different way. The Africans do, and so on. And similarly, if you were to ask somebody from France to speak Hindi, they would speak with Hindi with with a French accent. If somebody from China speaks Hindi, they would speak it with a Chinese accent. Imagine, hypothetically, imagine some Italian person speaking Hindi. How will that sound? Just imagine. It's never happened, but maybe you could think of some such thing. So that's how it is. Everybody has a certain native accent, and any language they speak will be infused with their native accent. And that's why, whether it's English, whether it's Hindi, whether it is Swahili, when somebody who is non-native speaks that language, they will add their own native accent and pronunciation to it. So that's why it happens. Okay, Hedgehog's dilemma says, if Pakistan fragments, what path will go to India? It's very clear. When Pakistan fragments, Kashmir, the entirety of Kashmir will come back to India. The parts that are under illegal Pakistani occupation, Gilgit Baltistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that will immediately come back to India. We will deal with the Chinese occupied Shaksgam Valley in due course. That also will return to India in due course, no doubt about it. So when Pakistan fragments, that's what's going to happen immediately. POK, Gilgit Baltistan, will come back to India immediately. What else will happen? The other parts of Pakistan, Punjab, Pakistani Punjab, Western Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, Northwest Frontier Province, or Pashtunistan, all these will not come to. We don't want them to come to India. Are we really prepared to reabsorb a radicalized terrorist population into India? I'm not saying all Pakistanis are terrorists. I have nothing against the Pakistani people. I have said this on various channels. Yeah, nothing personal against them. They are our people, the same blood, same DNA, same ancestry. Nothing against them. Hamare hi log hai, right? But this is a highly radicalized population. See what they are taught. See last week what one of the Pakistani teachers, college professor wrote. What they are teaching, what the students are taught. They are taught poison against India. So this is a highly radicalized population. There is a significant percentage of the population, non-trivial percentage of the population, that supports terrorism, and a significant percentage of them want India destroyed. Do we want to reabsorb those people right now? No, we don't. Let Sindh become Sindhu Desh, independent. Let Balochistan become independent Balochistan. Let Pashtunistan return to Afghanistan. Let the Pashtuns finally have their unified homeland. I'll be very happy to see that. Let Pakistani Punjab become its own country. Good for them. Balle balle, yeah. And Kashmir obviously will return to India. So that's what will happen. And maybe in 50 years, 100 years, we will de-radicalize them slowly. There are certain whatever programs happening right now. Ukraine is being denazified and so on. So we will eventually slowly over time de-radicalize them, and when the time is right, we will reabsorb them into the motherland of India. That's a long-term project, 50 years, 100 years. But immediately when the country is fragmented, those territories should be given independence. Kashmir should be reabsorbed into India, but if Pashtunistan goes back to Afghanistan, and the other territories become independent countries. That's what should happen immediately. Debashrit says, may the force be with you. Yes, thank you. What should be our strategy in the Indian Ocean region to create dominance? And how far in the ocean should we aim for dominance? Okay, good question. Let's go to the map. Here's the map. The Indian Ocean region is the entire region south of the Indian subcontinent. So this is the Indian subcontinent, as you know, and the entire region south of it is the Indian Ocean region, which extends from the coastline of Indonesia, Burma, the Andaman Sea, all the way to Western Australia, down to Antarctica, and we also talking about the eastern coast of Africa, Madagascar, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, and of course eastern the eastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula. All of this is the Indian Ocean region, and India occupies a God gifted dominant geographical position in this region. If India wants, in 10 years, it can dominate the entire region if it builds a strong enough navy. So the answer is very simple. In order to dominate this region, India needs to have a powerful navy and and what goes along with that is a powerful air force. So what do we do? So what we need to immediately aim for is we need to, in the next 5 to 10 years, be able to on demand choke off access to the various strategic choke points in the region. One is the Strait of Bab al Mandeb here between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. It is a very narrow region. If you dominate this region with your navy, you can choke it off. Same goes for the Strait of Hormuz over here between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. That's a very important strategic choke point. Then there are two other choke points: the the Strait of Malacca and the Sunda Strait over here. So that's where all the Chinese shipping goes through. And of course, we have the Andaman Sea. There are the very strategic. It's a very strategic region, or much of the shipping goes through the Andaman Sea, through the Andaman Nicobar Islands and the Lakshadweep Islands. So what India needs to do to dominate this region is first of all build a strong enough navy to dominate these choke points. And we don't want more aircraft carriers. People keep on saying that Abhijit is stupid. He says aircraft carriers are not important. They are not important. We have unsinkable aircraft carriers already. All these islands in the Andaman region, the Nicobar region, are unsinkable aircraft carriers. The Lakshadweep Islands are unsinkable aircraft carriers. We don't need to invest tens of billions of dollars into building these slow moving ships that are massive targets. We can leverage the geographical advantage we already have. That same money can be invested in building invisible deadly submarines. The submarines are the most dangerous ship in the naval world today in the 21st century. In the 20th century, the capital ship of every navy was the aircraft carrier. In the 21st century, the capital ship of any navy is the submarine. We need to invest in submarines, nuclear submarines, conventional submarines, lots of submarines. That's what we need. And of course, we should have a visible presence in the Indian Ocean, so we can build lots of cheap, uh, what do you call them, coast guard ships, vessels. Each vessel should not cost more than 10, 15, 20 million dollars. And you could even put BrahMos missiles on them, if you can engineer it properly. So you could have hundreds of BrahMos missiles in the Indian Ocean at our beck and call, at our disposal. All these steps, we should minimize the expenses and maximize the numbers, because quantity has a quality of its own. We don't have a huge amount of money to throw into this, so we need to be smart. Just like ISRO achieves so much on such a tight budget, similarly we can do a similar thing in the naval domain as well, and maximize our assets with the least amount of money. So build lots of cheap submarines, build a few very expensive nuclear submarines for sure, and build lots of surface vessels which are cheap and disposable, like coast guard vessels equipped with missiles. Missile boats are an underrated and very potent naval asset. We destroyed Karachi in 71 with missile boats, not with big warships. So these are the things that we should do. And if we do that, we will be able to dominate the Indian Ocean region. We can achieve that in the next 10 years if we get our things together. The problem is that the military has a certain way of thinking which goes back to the 20th century, unfortunately. That's why we need fresh blood in the military, fresh ideas. I know I sound like a armchair general sitting in an air-conditioned office and talking all kinds of things, but hey, I know what I'm talking about. I've been studying this all my life, and if you don't believe me, you can watch my interview, my conversation with Dr. Edward Luttwak, one of the greatest geostrategists who is still alive today, and he echoes what I'm saying. He says that aircraft carriers are not needed; they are obsolete. Submarines are what any forward-looking navy with big ambitions would invest in. Watch my conversation with Dr. Edward Luttwak, one of the most interesting conversations I've had in my whole life. Watch that. All right, next question. Nicolo says the video is interesting. If the Yamnaya were from the Indian subcontinent, I think Dr. Reich also conquers nowadays. So if the Yamnaya were from the Indian subcontinent, why didn't the Vedic dharma restrain their savagely violent impulses. If your theory is true, it undermines the narrative of a peaceful Bharat that doesn't invade other nations. This narrative is false. That Bharat is a peaceful nation that doesn't invade other nations. No, we are not a peaceful nation that doesn't invade other nations. Have you heard of the Cholas? The Cholas were Bharatiyas, right? Great emperors, Rajaraj and Rajendra, Chola. What did they do? Did they not invade and conquer the whole of Southeast Asia? The Cholas did that. What did the Guptas do? Whether it is Samudragupta, whether it is Kumar Gupta, or whether it's other Gupta emperors, they invaded all the way up to Central Asia, Bahlik, Balkh, and so on, conquered that region. What did the Kushans do? What did Lalitaditya Muktapida do? He conquered much of Central Asia. Kanishka the Great, one of the greatest Indian emperors, what did he do? His empire stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Aral Sea to the entirety of Xinjiang, Chinese occupied Xinjiang, and so on and so forth. We have always been a militaristically expansive power. We've always been that. Whenever India has been unified under a single emperor, it has been this way. It's never been a peaceful, non-violent country that doesn't invade. No, no, no. That is not true. Absolutely not true. If you study history, you will know that this is a lie. So Indians have always been vigorous in the military sphere. We have been a maritime civilization always. We've always expanded in various directions, traveled, whether it's for trade, whether it's for peaceful purposes, whether it's for spreading culture and civilization, or whether it's for military conquest. We have done that in the past. We will do that again in the future. We will conquer again. We're still waking up. Okay, in the coming decades, India is going to go back to its roots, and India will conquer again. No apologies. So the question about the Yamnaya. Yes, they were from the Indian subcontinent. They have the haplogroup R1b, which is a descendant of R1, which is a descendant of R, which is eventually a descendant of F, which are all Indian origin haplogroups. And this year, the Indian team is going to, led by Dr. Neeraj Rai and collaborators, is going to finally publish the paper about the origins of R1A, I believe. And so it's going to throw some clarity on this matter, further clarity. So the Yamnaya were from the Indian subcontinent. The steppe ancestry, so-called, right? We just saw that the steppe ancestry nowadays originates from Iran. Eventually, it will originate from the Ganga region, Ganga Valley. So the Yamnaya were from the Indian subcontinent. So why did the Vedic dharma not restrain their savagely violent impulses? Because it is known that the Yamnaya decimated the whole of Europe. They rampaged through the entirety of Eurasia. They wiped out native populations of Europe, the original native populations of Europe, only the males, not the females. And then they intermingled with the females and produced descendants who are the Europeans of today. So today's Europeans, their ancestry is paternally from the Yamnaya and maternally from the original European peoples. That's what it is. So why did these people, who were Indians of Indian origin, why did they behave in such a savage, violent, and brutal and barbaric manner when their ancestral culture was the Vedic culture, which is a very peaceful culture? Why is that so? Well, there are a number of things that one can speak about when it comes to this. Firstly, we kind of tend to believe that our Vedic ancestors were very philosophical, peaceful people who believed in meditation and non-violence 24/7. That's not the case. They were just as vigorous and ambitious as we are today. Our Vedic ancestors were also warriors. We had a number of Vedic clans who were always vying for territory and advantages of various kinds. We have the very famous event, the battle or war of 10 kings, which actually involved more than 10 kings. And it is the Bharata clan that came out on top under the great king Sudas, right? Who was the son of the great Divodas, son or grandson of Divodas. So Sudas, who was the king of the Bharata clan, prevailed, and all the losers were booted out of India and they went westwards and northwards, right? So, and one of the clans that was defeated was the Parshva clan, the Parshu people, who went westwards and populated Persia. Persia takes its name from the Parshu clan of the Vedic Indians. Now, it is possible that one of the offshoots of the people who lost, the clans who lost, may have been the ancestors of the Yamnaya. Possibly, it's a possibility. I'm not saying we know, we have proof, but it's a possibility. So, what happened to those people who went westwards and northwards? They left the Indian subcontinent and they settled. They went and settled down and migrated westwards and settled in various parts of Eurasia, Central Asia, and eventually they went all the way west into Europe. We know that. We know that. After they left the Indian subcontinent, they were their umbilical cord, their umbilical ties to the motherland was cut off, were cut off, and over time they shed the Vedic rituals and rites and culture and customs. So if you look at the various ancient Indian texts, they refer to the people of Central Asia, Uttara Kuru, Uttara Madra, etc., as Mlecha people, not ethnically but culturally, because they have abandoned the Vedic dharma. They don't practice it fully. They don't honor the Vedic rituals fully. They practice some of them, but not all of them. They are lax, and there is some laxity in their behavior, and they have acquired some barbaric traits, and so on. So that's why they are called Mlechas. The Yavanas, the Ionians were also Mlechas. They also would have eventually originally had some Vedic culture, but eventually they gave it up. So over time, as the time increased and the distance from the homeland increased, the culture changed. Their pantheon of gods remained the same all across Eurasia until the advent of Christianity. You had the same culture in various local manifestations, whether it was the Celtic culture or the Nordic culture or the Teutonic culture or the Germanic culture or the Italic culture or the Ionian culture, the Greek culture, Carthaginian, not the Carthaginian culture, but whatever, Santorini and so on. They all had various local manifestations of the same ancient Indo-European culture, which originates from India, the Vedic culture. The Vedic pantheon of gods is the same, is the template for the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, and the Viking pantheon of gods. Same gods with different names, same stories. So they retained the core elements of the culture, but they started exhibiting laxity in the way they lived their lives. So slowly they lost the ethics and morality that are the bedrock of dharma. If you see Europe, the Celtic people, etc., they had all these bloodletting and human sacrifice and animal sacrifice and all that, which you never find in Vedic Dharma, right? In Vedic Dharma, the most you have is Ashwamedha Yagna. Sometimes you have certain other Medas also, but it's a very rare ritual. So things changed, culture changed, and eventually these people who went and lived in Central Asia, they felt they were free from the motherland. There was no need to carry on the same culture, the same ethics, same morality. They started living on horseback. The entire land was empty of people. So just go wherever you can, and whatever else, whatever belongs to other people, if you can do, if you can take it, you take it. And slowly they became more and more barbarized. So ethnically, they were still of Indian origin, but they had given up their Indian culture and Indian morality and ethics and dharma, and they became barbarians. And you see the result. You see what they did in Europe. They conquered the whole of Europe, and their descendants are today's Europeans. So that's what happened, right? That's what happened. Things change. Aman Prasad says, why does the national media ignore northeast of India? Eastern India, Northeast, especially Southern India also. Is it done by the political class to keep India a divided country, or is it a problem of media only? It's a political thing, it's a media thing, it's a lot. The entire establishment after 1947 was Delhi centric. It was all Delhi centric. Everything was Delhi, 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 right? And there was a time when the central government would have incredible amounts of power. They could dismiss any state government anytime they wanted for whatever flimsy reason or pretext. And entire regions of India were totally marginalized. If you see the amount of development you have, if you take the map of India, where's the map of India? Here's the map. Here's the map. If you see the map of India, yeah, from top to bottom, including the Andaman, Nicobar, and Lakshadweep and all that, and if you divide, if you draw an imaginary dividing line between Ladakh and Kanyakumari. If you take the western half of that, of the country, starting from that imaginary dividing line, you will see a certain amount of development in the western half of the country. And if you see the eastern half of the country, you will see much less development there. So most of the development in India happened in the western part of India since 1947. The eastern part of India was totally ignored. And the further east you went, the more marginalization you had. So the northeast of India was totally, completely marginalized until the 2010s, until the 2015s. It's only now that we are seeing progress in the so-called northeast of India, which is actually the far east of India. States like Nagaland, Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, etc., were totally marginalized. There was no development, no job prospects, nothing there. Separatism was rife for decades. Insurgencies were going on, and the central government simply didn't care. And many state governments, maybe not all, many of them were deeply, deeply corrupt, and they were hand in glove with all kinds of various elements, all aided and abetted and encouraged from the center for the longest time. So this is very much a political thing. And of course, the Indian media was all patronized by the politicians, especially the central government. So they also totally ignored what was happening in the Northeast. There would be all kinds of things happening which would never find any coverage in the media. So the problem is the most acute in the Northeast. Even today, people don't know what is the capital of, let's say, Mizoram, or what's the capital of let's say, Meghalaya. Yeah, what's the capital of Arunachal? Doesn't even know that. Most people don't know anything about these places. People have never been there. And is in the past, when somebody from the northeast of India would come to a large city, people would think they are from China or something. That's the kind of, and it's not the common person's fault that they had these sort of notions. It's because the education system did not teach anyone that this region is an integral and essential part of India, and these people are as Indian as everybody else. We were never taught this. So it's the cause of all of this is, first of all, the government and political apathy. Secondly, the education system completely ignored the Northeast. Thirdly, the media didn't care. The media was did whatever the political masters told it, and so on. So, and the same goes for many parts of southern India. And that is why there is a sense of marginalization among certain populations in South India, southern India, that the entire Indian political landscape is north dominated, the media is north dominated, and so on. And there is an element of truth to this, and this causes divisions in society. And people from various parts of India start resenting people from other parts of India when those people have done nothing. It is the politicians, the education system, and the media that have caused these problems. But the antipathy goes towards the population, towards the residents of various other parts of India. So that is how great a way is that of creating divisions in Indian society. Instead of integrating Indian society together, you are dividing it further. And of course, you have various religious and political agendas that go hand in hand, and so on. So that's why there are all these problems. The southern part of India is ignored. Uh, in Kashmir, the whole of Ladakh was ignored for the longest time. People thought everything is Kashmir. The Kashmir, whatever the problem is relegated and confined to a small valley, but that dominates the entire region, as if all of that is also part of the problem. So that's the kind of narrative the media constructs. That's why people don't trust the media anymore. The media cannot be trusted. No, in the media also today you have two different groups: left wing and right wing, nationalistic and anti-national, whatever. I don't trust any of them. There may be some good people in there, and some channels may be really good, but overall, they are all, well, it's a business, and they will do whatever it takes to create controversies. That's what they do. Some small protest is happening, 20 people are protesting, and you will have 50 cameras around them. 20 people are protesting in some part of a city, no one cares, but there are 50 cameras, video cameras from all the news channels in India, and they put it on the media, on the news, 24/7. There's a massive protest happening, and then people start believing that the whole country is under siege. So that's the kind of narrative the media creates, both sides of the political divide. So so that's what creates all these problems in the country. So that's why all of this has happened. Okay, Jaidev says, what is the significance of the Falkland Islands in geopolitics? What benefits do these islands provide to the UK? And why does Argentina claim them? Okay, where's the map? Where is the map? Where are the Falkland Islands? The Malvinas. Okay, where's the map? Here's the map. So now we go to the Atlantic, South Atlantic. So this here is South America. Yes, you know that. You come to the southern part. The southeastern part of the South American continent is Argentina, all the way down south to Cape Horn. Cape Horn is a very, very stormy place. Terrible weather, terrible weather. So this here is Argentina. West of Argentina is the country of Chile, and east of Argentina you have Las Islas Malvinas, which the British call the Falkland Islands. Okay, now this is occupied by the British, by the UK. Now, where is the UK? If you go all the way north, here is the UK. So this little country sitting here occupies these islands all the way in the southern hemisphere of the coast of Argentina. And Argentina claims these islands because it is like right off their coast, a couple of 100 kilometers, 300 kilometers maybe from the coast of Argentina. It is natural that if there is this bunch of islands off the coast of a major country, it should belong to that country. But there's a history behind this. The British occupied the islands for some time, and there was a war in the 1980s. So what happened is that in 1982, I believe, the Argentinians invaded and occupied these islands, and Margaret Thatcher, she ordered her navy, her military, to launch an expedition to reconquer the islands. Then there was a war over here. The Americans kind of supported the UK, and the UK eventually was able to defeat the Argentines and reestablish control over these islands. So that's what happened. The capital city is Stanley, right? So that's what it is. Now, what benefit does it provide to either country? For Argentina, it is essentially a matter of honor and prestige that these islands off our coast should belong to us. Very simple. Why should it belong to a country that lies several thousand kilometers away? And of course, you want more territory. If you hold a bunch of islands, it's good for you. The British, they want, well, what geopolitical benefit does the UK gain from it? Nothing. The UK is not a world power. The UK is a has-been power. It is a power that has lost its relevance and significance in geopolitics. It is no longer an active player in geopolitics, except as being an American vassal state. So it provides no benefits to the UK, but it provides some benefits to the US. Because if your vassal state holds some islands in this region, it's good for you. You can use it in the future for some military purpose or whatever purpose. So that's what it is. For the UK, it's just about prestige, holding on to past glory. So they were able to do it in 1982. Their military, their navy was still more powerful than the Argentine navy, and they were tacitly supported by the US, and that's what happened. So yeah, that's in very brief about the Falkland Islands. And the UK doesn't really have any major role to play in geopolitics, but it's just holding on to that region for prestige, nothing more. Okay, this is by Vishal. What could be could the next major conflict escalate between Greece and Turkey over the Aegean Islands? Would India support Greece in such a situation, considering that Turkey sides with Pakistan? Okay, what is this entire thing about? Where's the map? We go back to the map. This time we go to the Mediterranean region. So this here is the Aegean Sea. If you can see my mouse pointer, hopefully you can. Let me zoom in. In the center of the screen is the Aegean Sea. In the west is Greece. In the east is Turkey, Anatolia. In the north is the European portion of Turkey, west of Constantinople, which was once known as Thrace. Okay, so the Aegean Sea is what divides Anatolia or Turkey from Greece. And if you see, there's a whole bunch of islands there. And these islands are very close to Turkey. But if you see, let's take the island of Samos, okay? If I click here, it will say that this is part of Turkey. So where I clicked is Turkey, and just a couple of kilometers away, less than 2 kilometers away, it is Greece. So these Greek islands are right off the coast of Turkey, a whole bunch of islands, all Greek islands right off the coast of Turkey. Now, obviously, Turkey covets these islands. Turkey is a territorially expansionist nation. So what happened? How did so many Greek islands end up right off the coast of Turkey? To understand that, we have to go back to the 1910s and 1920s. At the end of World War One, the Ottoman Empire, which had supported Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire ended up on the losing side. And the victorious powers dismantled the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. They carved Turkey up into a bunch of pieces, and various portions of Turkey were handed over to various European powers. And some parts were in the possession of the Balkan states. I mean, the Bulgarians had certain ambitions when it came to Turkish territory. The Greeks had some ambitions because originally the entirety of Anatolia was Greek, right? All of this was originally Greek. It was part of the Eastern Roman Empire, which had an immense amount of Greek culture and influence. And even before the Roman Empire was a thing, Anatolia was part of Greece. The ancient city of Troy, where is it? Hisar Lake, where is it today? Somewhere here. It was in Anatolia, Troy. So the Greeks have territorial ambitions when it comes to retaking their ancient homeland of Anatolia. So at the end of the Second World War, the Europeans had taken over Turkey. Now the Turkish nationalist soldier Mustafa Kemal, he fought the Turkish War of Independence. He fought against the occupying powers. He fought against his own caliph, the last Sultan of Turkey, and he came out on top. He defeated them all. He established an independent nation of Turkey, and he was given the name of Ataturk by his people, the father of the Turks. So when he won the War of Independence, all the occupying forces were driven off, and the city of Izmir, which was known as Smyrna, was burned. All the Greeks, Armenians, all the Christians were driven off. Many of them were massacred, and they all escaped from there. So the Turks took over the entirety of Anatolia, this peninsular region, but they were not able to take over the Greek islands. So the possession of all these islands remained in the hands of the Greeks at the end of the Turkish War of Independence, 1920, 22, whatever it is. And that's where the map has been ever since. But I am sure the Turks, if they become militarily more powerful, would want to take over parts of some of these islands in the future. We know that they took over Cyprus in the 1970s. Cyprus is a Greek island. It was a Greek island until the 1970s. Which year was it? Somewhere in the 70s. The Turks invaded Cyprus and they partitioned the country into into two parts. North Cyprus is held by Turkey. It is occupied by Turkey now. And the south of Cyprus is still in Greek possession. So they could do a similar thing in the future with Rhodes, perhaps with Samos, and there are various other islands like Lesbos and so on. So it could happen in the future. Uh, Maybe sometime in the future when things become more geopolitically fluid. Would India support Greece in such a situation, considering that Turkey sides with Pakistan? You don't support a country out of principle. You support a country in geopolitics when you have something to gain. If we support Greece over Turkey, what do we gain? We can issue a statement that we condemn so and so and we support so and so, but beyond words, India is going to invest nothing in such a war or such a fight because we don't quite have a horse in that race. If Turkey wins, we gain or lose nothing. If Greece wins, we gain or lose nothing. So, from a geopolitical perspective, it has to always be about your own self-interest, your national interest. Uh, we would certainly issue a condemnation to whoever invades first. If Turkey invades any Greek island, I am sure India would condemn it, and we would vote against Turkey in the UN. So all of those symbolic gestures we could do, but beyond that, no material support will be forthcoming for sure, unless we have something to really gain from it. So that's what I can say in brief about this. Joydev says, what significance does the country's name hold on the global level? After Turkey changed its name to Turkey, what impact by changing our country's name to from Republic of Bharat to Bharatiya Ganraj can create? Excuse me. See, a name change is a symbolic thing. It has no geopolitical impact as such. It has a symbolic impact. It has an emotional impact. Um, Changing a country's name is aimed at your local people, at your local population. It has implications at an internal level rather than at an external level. For me, I don't care whether you call Turkey or Turkey or ostrich or whatever. I don't care what you call it. It is what it is. Whatever title you put on that geographical territory, it's going to still behave the same in geopolitics. So, from a geostrategic perspective, a name change does nothing. But from a cultural perspective, it has a certain significance. So it's all about the rise of Turkish nationalism. We will no longer define ourselves by a name given to us by foreigners. We will use our own native name for our country. That's the message that's being given out. So it's aimed primarily at the people of Turkey, that we are going to be a more nationalist nation now onwards. So if India changes its name from India to Bharat, it is going to mean nothing in geopolitics. But yeah, the perception will change. People of the world will see India differently. That yeah, India is becoming more nationalistic. There is a rise of wave of nationalism and all that. That's what the New York Times and the Guardian and Washington Post, etc. They will say it's a continuation of the nationalistic policies of the local of the government and so on. So there's going to be, if we do that, it will have certain some such ripples or impact, but nothing big from a geopolitical perspective. But it will impact the self image of the people of India. It will have an effect on the psyche of the people of India. There will be a resurgence of national pride among the people who are nationalistic, and there will be protests and riots and arson and all that from the people who are within India but they hate India and who are agents of other forces. So that sort of thing will happen. So that's the whole uh, basket of scenarios. Nikhil says, I am a software developer. I use cloud hosting, Git, cloud services like Amazon Web Services, Azure, AI models, other tech services that are vital to the software industry on a daily basis. There isn't a single one of them that is an Indian company. I'm afraid of how much power the US has over our entire software industry. Imagine if they outlawed Visa and MasterCard in Russia. If they do the same in India with Amazon Web Services, our entire industry will collapse since we don't have an alternative. What are your views on this? I agree with you completely. Cloud hosting is an integral part of the entire software industry. If they cut off access to AWS or any other cloud hosting service, or to the major cloud hosting services, the entire sector could collapse. The entire IT sector, software sector could collapse. Git, all of these things are based in the US. I spoke about Web 3 yesterday, in Web 2 and Web 3 and Web 5. Web 3 is about the decentralized web where nobody owns the information, where all the information is available in a decentralized manner. That needs to be implemented. Right now, too much power resides in the hands of one country and in a small number of individuals within that one country. A bunch of billionaires from Silicon Valley and the people who own those billionaires, which is the US deep state. So it is extremely dangerous for the world because so much power resides in such a small number of people, and they can cut it off at will. They can deny it to you at will if you don't bend to their demands. So we have to understand that this is what we are living through right now. Our country is technically independent, but we are still so very dependent on on the West, on the US for all of these things. They they switched off Mastercard and Visa in Russia. They cut off access to SWIFT, and it's caused so much trouble in Russia. Now we have developed UPI. We are developing the next level of UPI, and so that's great. The Indian payments infrastructure is way better, way more advanced, and way faster than what they have in the West. So that is an advantage we have created. Now we need to start developing our own infrastructure, whether it is cloud hosting or any of these other services. All of that needs to be replicated in India, and hopefully we will see the rise of blockchain, the rise of Web3, and hopefully something beyond Web3, Web4, Web5, whatever you want to call it, which is truly decentralized, a truly decentralized internet, so that nobody actually can cut off access to anything. We have had this since the for the past 20 years or so. The P2P technology, what's it called? Torrent technology, BitTorrent, and all that. So that is something. Those files can never be taken off the internet as long as somebody is seeding them. It's all available in a decentralized manner. No, you simply cannot delete that from the internet. Once it's there, it's there. So if the entire web is decentralized like that using blockchain technology, then these problems will go away. But even today, Web3 is not fully decentralized. It is still very much in the custody of a small number of people in Silicon Valley. So the internet needs to evolve. It needs to become properly, truly, genuinely decentralized. And India should also, while that happens, India should, in parallel, at the same time, create its own infrastructure, which replicates whatever the US has: cloud services, AI models, Git, and so on, AWS, Azure, whatever. All of that needs to happen in India also, so that we can fully, truly become independent. Right now, we are dependent on the US for all of these things. So this is a very good point that Nikhil makes, and I agree with him. Kiran says, why has communism never been implemented the way Karl Marx intended it to be? He predicted capitalism will collapse and naturally transition to a socialism based to socialism. Will that ever be possible? So the question really is, why has communism never been implemented the way Karl Marx wanted it to be implemented? Okay. So my question is, what did Karl Marx want? How did he want communism to be implemented? How? What he said is, society is controlled by the capitalists. They control the means of production. They control the means of distribution. They have a stranglehold, a chokehold of the economy and everything else. They own the people who are in power and blah blah blah. All that. He said society is terrible. It's very unequal. The proletariat, the unwashed masses, the laborers, they are oppressed. So what Karl Marx said is that there needs to be a dictatorship of the proletariat, a number of people, a group of people who will hold all power in the name of the proletariat, of the workers of the world. Unite together, overthrow the capitalists, overthrow the bourgeoisie, get rid of the lumpen elements or whatever it is, the lumpen proletariat. So the proletariat must rise up. There needs to be a revolution. Karl Marx wanted a revolution, and he wanted a dictatorship of the proletariat, and he wanted a collectivized society where all property is collectivized. Nobody owns anything, but everybody owns everything. You don't own anything in specific, but you own everything. Everybody is given whatever they need, right? But you have to work in exchange for that, and everybody lives an ideal life. Work in the daytime, read in the evening, criticize in the night, drink a glass of whiskey and go to sleep. That sort of thing. So the ideal Marxist life, that's what he wanted. So what are the specifics? He said that the way to transition from a capitalist society to a Marxist society is via a people's revolution. So he wanted the transition to be via revolutions. A revolution is a violent overthrow of the existing government, existing regime. So he wanted violence. Did he specify what sort of people should lead the revolution? What sort of leadership did he envisage that would lead the revolution? He said nothing about that. And when we talk about violence, it's always the most violent people who become the leaders at the end of a violent coup, typically. Secondly, he said there should be a dictatorship of the proletariat. Did he ever say that what kind of people should come to power in this dictatorship of the proletariat, and who will decide who comes to power, and who will lead a post capitalist society? Once Marxism is established, who should lead the people? Who should be in the government? He never said anything about that. He never defined the ideal leadership. He never defined the leadership structure. He never defined how the leadership will be selected or elected. Will there be a democratic election, or did he despise democracy? Did he want authoritarian rule? He said nothing about these things. And that is why communism has never been implemented in any proper way, because Karl Marx never defined what he really wanted. He said violent overthrow of capitalism and dictatorship. You could interpret that in 3,000 million different ways. So he has deliberately created this problem. And every time communism fails, they say that, yeah, they did not implement it properly. There is no right way or proper way of implementing it, because Karl Marx never defined what the correct way is. Communism, Marxism invariably attracts the most despotic people, because the people who truly understand what Marxism is, well, they are the ones who are the most ambitious and the most unscrupulous people. So that is why Marxism or communism has always failed. It has always caused misery, trouble, and starvation, genocide, massacres, and so on. Look at Russia, look at the USSR, look at the communist China, look at Mao's regime, look at uh, Stalin's regime, Nikita Khrushchev, and all that. The gulags. Look at Pol Pot's experiment in Cambodia. Look at Angola. Look at all the other Marxist experiments. It's always been a disaster at the end, right? I'm not saying it's a bad idea. If you could have, there are certain Indians who say there should be dharmic Marxism. Well, maybe that should be tried. I'm just saying. So there are a million different ways of interpreting Marxism and implementing it. Thus far, it's been done in a terrible way. Maybe there could be a good way of doing it, but we still haven't found it. I mean, we still haven't seen it implemented in a way that is actually beneficial in the long run for the people and the nation. All right. Okay. Jaidev says, what kind of politics is going to be played in the space race and Mars colonization? Who will dominate this arena? The powerful people or the one who reaches first? So the easiest way to understand this is to draw a parallel with the age of uh, the past 500 years, the age of exploration of the seas. So the European powers, uh, they developed means of navigation, ships, the compass, the sextant, and various instruments and so on, and they were able to map out the trade routes, the various sea routes and all. They started exploring the oceans. And the Portuguese did that, the Spanish did that, the British did that, the French did that. All the major European powers were on this race to explore the world, to explore the far reaches of all the oceans, the South Atlantic, North Atlantic, North Pacific, South Pacific, the Antarctic Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, and rediscover India, rediscover China, and so on and so forth. They discovered the Americas. There was a big race to discover new places, to map out the entire world, and to colonize every last piece or last square kilometer of the non-European landmass. Right? So the same thing is eventually going to happen in space. We are at the very beginning of the space race. And in the 21st century, the two or three nations that will lead the world in space exploration are the two or three countries that will rule the world overall. It's not going to be more than two or three countries. Eventually, there'll be just one, I believe, right? One or two, maximum two. So, who will dominate this arena? The most powerful power or the one that reaches first? I think it could be the one who reaches eventually. You don't need to have first mover advantage. If you look at technology, if you look at exploration, colonization, the one who moved first is not necessarily the one who succeeded overall. Who came first to India? It was the Portuguese who came first to India. But eventually, and the British came a century later. The British were late by 100 years, and yet they were the ones who conquered India eventually, and they established the largest empire the world has ever seen until the US empire. So it's not always the most powerful one that starts. So as of today, the US is the most powerful. The Chinese are number two. So these are the number two nations, the top two nations. Are these two going to be the one that dominates space in the future in the next 100, 200, 500 years? Maybe not. They will certainly be the two, three countries that move the fastest. Um, but eventually, the ones that achieve the biggest technological breakthroughs and do the most with the least, they could be the ones who dominate in the long run. So space exploration is going to tie into the geopolitics that we have on Earth, because space exploration is all about resources. It's all about expanding to new territories. It's about acquiring new territories, new resources, new lands. And so that's all about control. It's all about power. It's all about wealth. Uh, so in the moon, there is this rush right now going on. The great moon rush is happening now. The Americans want to go there. The Chinese want to go there. India possibly, hopefully, will not be left behind. So in the long run, you will see colonies on the moon. In the long run, you will see colonies on Mars. The first colonies could be American, Russian, Chinese colonies, perhaps. But who will dominate in the end? It depends. We don't know quite yet. But the ones that will uh, make the most technological progress eventually will win. So that's what will happen in the long run. Dangar Singh Chauhan says, we humans are very weak compared to some giant reptiles, yet we survived. So, if our weak selves made it, then why couldn't a massive prehistoric alpha predator like Titanoboa was able to ensure his survival? Okay, so we humans are tiny and weak compared to other animals. We survived. Other animals are way more powerful than us. Even our cousins, the chimpanzees, the orangutans, the gorillas, who are so close to us genetically, they are much more powerful physically than us, right? And massive animals used to exist. The Titanoboa. So, who is this guy Titanoboa? It was the largest snake that ever lived. Let me show you what this creature looked like. Titanoboa. Let's go to Google for a change. Where is Google? And let's search for Titanoboa. Titanoboa. BOA. Titanoboa, a snake. So this snake lived about 60, 65 million years before today. It has gone extinct, of course. Um, it lived right after the extinction event of the non-avian dinosaurs. Massive, massive snake. Let's see a comparison. So see how big it was. Way, way huger than a human being. Massive snake. King of the snakes, the largest snake that we know of. That's how large this creature was. Much, much larger than the largest snake that lives today, which is the anaconda. So the size is about 43 feet, longer than a bus, and it could easily eat several human beings if it wanted to. So why did such a powerful, massive, monstrous snake die out, and why did us little humans survive? That is the question. So size can be a disadvantage from an evolutionary perspective. When we talk about evolution, we're talking about the the course that a species takes over millions of years. Okay, so there is something called evolutionary advantage, survival of the fittest. You don't need to be enormous and muscular to be fit. Sometimes you can be thin and weak physically but be fitter. So if we look at the entire history, in the entire known history of our planet, of the life on our planet, then from all the life forms that we know of, from the fossil record, etc., the most dangerous species that has ever lived, the deadliest species that has ever lived, is Homo sapiens. Not the dinosaurs, not T Rex, not Titanoboa, not anybody, not any other species. The most dangerous predator that has ever existed is Homo sapiens. And the tool that we have used is not our massive strength or anything like that. It's the brain. It's the brain power. We are the most intelligent of the species that we have known to have existed on the planet. And that intelligence is the greatest tool that we have. It is the greatest advantage that we have. And we are a naturally violent species. We are a warlike species. Our entire history is a history of warfare. The entire history of the human species is a history of warfare. Even our close cousins, the chimpanzees, are just as aggressive and violent as us. They have clan warfare and gang warfare. You should see the documentaries. Brutal. So it is something that's in our DNA. We are the most intelligent species that possibly ever lived on our planet, and we are extremely aggressive, extremely violent. That's in our DNA. So that is why we have been able to rise to the top of the food chain. Today all other species are subsidiary to us. We are on top of the food chain. We are the apex predator. We are a super predator, right? Even if T-Rex was alive today, I think people would be barbecuing the T-Rex, and we would find T-Rex uh, meat in the supermarkets. The size doesn't matter. A T-Rex is nothing compared to a 10-year-old child with a gun, right? So, and sometimes a large size can be a massive evolutionary disadvantage. If you are a 50-foot snake, imagine how much food you need to eat on a daily or weekly basis. These giant reptiles, snakes, pythons, anacondas, they typically eat food once a week, or two, three times a month. But they need to eat large amounts of food in order to sustain their bodies, because they have very massive bodies. And these are predators, carnivorous animals. So a massive snake like Titanoboa would have to hunt regularly and eat massive amounts of food. And this was primarily a snake that lived in the waters, and it hunted on sea animals, fish, mammals, etc., reptiles, etc. And in case there is climate change or some kind of evolutionary change in which the food becomes scarce, then a massive species like this will easily go extinct, because it won't be able to find sufficient food to ensure its long term survival. Whereas if you are a small species, you don't need that much food. And if you're intelligent enough, you can find food from anywhere, in any way possible, using foraging techniques, using hunter gatherer techniques, or if you invent agriculture. So that is why we survived, and these species like Titanoboa, etc., went extinct. We were around when the dinosaur extinction happened. When the Chicxulub impact event happened 66 million years ago, when all the non-avian dinosaurs died out, our ancestors were there and they survived somehow. So we are a very hardy species. And our ancestors at that time, 66 million years ago, did not look like us. They were this small. They were rat-like animals, right? That's what they were. Small, tiny mammals that lived under the ground. They behaved like rats, and their descendants ended up like us. So, survival of the species is a long term game. It's something that happens over millions of years. And if you evolve in the right way, you will rise to the top of the food chain, as we have. And these massive beasts that look so impressive, they don't last long, unfortunately. That is the story. Okay. Mm, are motivational speakers and life coaches any good? Can they make some difference in the lives of their audience? Um, Motivation is for beginners. If you need motivation to start, you will end up nowhere. Motivation should not come from outside you. Motivation should come from inside you. And motivation will come if you know who you are and what your path should be. If you have a long term goal that is worthwhile, that is worth achieving, then you don't need external motivation. Your motivation will come from itself. You will wake up in the morning ready to go and fight to achieve that goal in 10 years time. These motivational speakers, what they do is they play on your emotions. They try to charge you up. So it gives you an emotional high. Yeah, I'm gonna do it, blah blah blah. After half an hour, that emotion is gone. The motivation is also gone. So what motivational speakers do is they conflate emotions with motivation. Emotions are things that go up and down, up and down. A person who's driven by emotions will never achieve much in their life. Emotional people are like a boat, are like boats in the sea. When there's a big wave, they go up. When there are no waves, it will be completely flat. You go up and down on the emotional roller coaster, and you don't have a stable life. So motivational speakers try to play on your emotions, but after half an hour, the motivation is gone because the emotion is gone. True motivation comes from inside. And if you have motivation, you don't need any motivational speaker or any motivational music or anything. You just wake up ready to fight and go on the mission. So to make a difference in your life, you need to have a goal, a big goal, a 10-year goal. And then you can then that will motivate you. Life coaches are a different breed of animal. A life coach, I imagine, would give you strategies and tactics about how to achieve a goal. So let's explain what it is like. Let's say you are at point A and you want to end up at point D. From A to D, and you don't know how to get there. You don't have the map. Let's say you are sitting in Bangalore and you want to reach Berlin. You know, you are here and you want to reach there, but you don't have a map, so you don't know how to go there. Should I go by train? Should I go by taxi? Should I go by auto rickshaw? Should I go by plane? Should I go by submarine? How should I go? And what route to take? So you need a map. So what a good life coach would do is they will give you a map and they will show you two, three different ways of reaching there, and they will also show you the best way of reaching there. So that's what a life coach does. A life coach is very different from a motivational speaker. A life coach, if you have a good one, I expect, would make a good difference in your life. But motivation speakers are just they just play on people's emotions. I I don't see any value in that personally. Maybe it helps some people. If it does help you, good for you. It's never helped me. I've seen some motivational speeches and all. It's just they're just playing on people's emotions, right? So that's what I have to say about this. An amazing Indian citizen says, have you ever felt that you have learned everything in science, history, geopolitics, etc.? If yes, how did you overcome it? I have never had to overcome this because I've never felt this way. I always feel that I know nothing. I have so much to learn. I am simply sharing with you all what I am learning. I always read, I am always learning something every day. There is so much I have to learn. I know so little, whether it is science or it's mathematics or history or geopolitics. There is so much history that I still haven't explored that I would like to explore. There are so many minute details that are very interesting about various phases of Indian and world history, especially world history. There is so much in science that I haven't explored. There is so much mathematics I still need to learn. Probably I won't learn that because it's kind of a, I only learn certain math if it's useful, if it has some useful application in physics, but that's how it is. So I have never felt once in my life, even once, that I know everything. The the constant feeling I have always had is that I have so much to learn. I have learned nothing thus far, and that's why I always keep learning something. So that's my perspective. That's how I am. I have never ever for one microsecond had the feeling that I know so much. No, man, I don't. Right? Okay, that's it for today's questions. Let's take some live chat questions for the next 5 minutes. And when I talk about motivational speakers, i I am not pointing fingers individually at anybody. I don't even know who the big motivational speakers out there are. Okay, because I don't consume that sort of content. I don't watch that. I'm not into that. So please don't construe this as me pointing fingers at anybody. I'm not. I'm sure there must be some good ones out there. So yeah, that's what I have to say about this matter. Now, any questions? Please answer Sambo Mukhopadhyay's question about South Korea. Who is Sambo Mukhopadhyay? What is that question? Okay, look, there are millions of questions here, but if I can find, so some people get really upset that I did not pick their question. Please, my dear friends, please understand. I get thousands of questions every week in the comments. I can only pick 20, 30. And in the chat here, I can see questions coming in every second. I Most likely I'm going to miss your question. I try my best to pick up the questions. So please don't take it personally if I don't answer your question. I am trying to pick up the questions that will serve everybody as best as possible, that will help the maximum number of people. All right, so please don't take it personally. Now, let's see some questions if there are any. Atharva says how to learn geopolitics, just like me, and how to read book properly. If you just like you remember the whole book properly. How to learn geopolitics? I have never learned geopolitics. I have learned history. I have been incredibly curious about history. I started with world history. I have spent thousands of hours possibly reading history books. Okay, world history, Egyptian history, Roman history, Greek history, Indian history, eventually Chinese history, Mongol history, Japanese history, history from the colonial era, and so on. I have spent thousands of hours. I've read thousands of books, thousands of articles. You cannot understand geopolitics unless you understand history well. And you cannot understand history well unless you spend thousands of hours reading thousands of books. There is no substitute for hard work. People, I'm not saying Atharva, you are doing this, but I see this question lots of times, and people seek shortcuts. Give me one book. If I read that book, I will know geopolitics. Never going to happen. There is no substitute for hard work. There is no substitute for patience. Okay, so you got to put in the time. You got to read. The best way to learn geopolitics is to be incredibly curious about history, world history. And the more you read about world history, the more you read, the more you'll be able to cross link events across the world, and the patterns will slowly start becoming visible. And once the patterns of history start becoming visible, you will start understanding the cause and effect dynamic. And once you understand the cause and effect chain, the causality chain, that's when you will start understanding geopolitics, because the same patterns are visible today. These are timeless patterns, and all the events and forces and powers and persons that drove historical events in the past centuries, the same patterns are applicable today. We are still seeing the same patterns today. You understand history, you will understand geopolitics, and you will understand the root causes of all the conflicts that are happening today. There is no substitute for hard work. There is no substitute for reading thousands of books, and there is no substitute for having patience. So I don't have any shortcuts to offer to any of you, but I can offer you the path, the only path I know. All right. Hope that helps. Okay, let me take maybe a question or two more. Um, when will you do a one-on-one video conference? I love asking questions in person. I kind of enjoy that, but I also that format I've tried multiple times in the past. The problem in that format is that people kind of take advantage of me being a nice person. I'm not rude. I'm not a rude person. I am a very lenient person, and people. The one rule I have on these shows when I do a video thing is that everybody asks one question, but then people take advantage and they ask multiple questions. They want to hog the thing. They want to hold on to the thing as long as possible. And so I personally feel that when I do these video calls, when I invite people to talk to me on video and ask questions on video, there is no quality control. Anybody can come and ask anything, which is not a big problem. But sometimes the question they ask is not the best question, and sometimes they just try to prolong their time on screen as long as possible. So it's not beneficial to everybody. It's beneficial to one person at a time. The intent of this show is to answer the best possible questions from this whole pool that I get every week, and help as many people as possible with some knowledge that I may have. That is the intent of this show. The show is not about me, it's not about any individual person, it's about everybody as a whole. That's what I wish to do, and that's why I have kind of stopped the video conference thing right now. Maybe I will not do that I have no immediate plans of restarting that. So yeah, it's I'm sure people enjoy it. I also enjoy it, but it's not beneficial for everybody. So that's why I am not doing it right now. Okay. Any other questions? So many questions. I will take one more final question. Okay, Shriyansh says, what do people who live in China or Japan think? Where does Buddhism come from? Everyone knows it comes from India. No question. Everyone knows it. The Chinese know it comes from India. The Japanese know it comes from India. Everybody who is a Buddhist knows where it comes from. So there is no doubt about that. And over there, they don't even see much of a difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. It's only us in India who try to, because of political reasons, who are trying to create a delineation or dividing line between Bauddha dharma and Hindu dharma, and they are separate things. No, there is no such thing as a separate thing. They are the same thing. There are small technical differences between Buddhism and Hinduism, but look at the morals and ethics that the people who follow Buddhism or Hinduism have. Exactly the same values, the same morality, the same ethics, the same principles. Yeah, some technical differences about whether there is a soul or not, or whether the soul is immortal or not. Those technical differences don't matter. Your values are the same. Your lifestyle is the same. So it's the same thing. The differences may be 1%. The similarities are 99%. If you don't believe me, see what the Dalai Lama says. The Dalai Lama is the highest ranking Buddhist uh, person today. See what the Dalai Lama has said multiple times about Buddhism and Hinduism. If you don't trust me, I'm sure you can trust the Dalai Lama, the greatest authority on Buddhism today. So that's what I have to say about this. And with this, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you very much, everybody. As always, a great pleasure answering all these questions. And I can see new people are coming in with some new questions, which is great to see. So we shall continue doing this, and I will see you in the next episode next week. Until then, take care. Thank you very much. Great again to be with you all, and I will see you next week. Take care.